Some moments split life into before and after. The job loss, the betrayal, the diagnosis, the final goodbye you never saw coming. In the space of a heartbeat, the ground beneath you vanishes, and what's left is rubble, ringing in your ears, a question echoing through the dust. That question can swallow you, or it can forge you. The Stoics believed heartbreak isn't a detour from the path, it's the path stripped of illusion. When everything you leaned on is gone, only one frontier remains, the mind that witnesses it all. And on that inner frontier, 12 timeless truths await, 12 torches to guide you through the dark corridors of pain until dawn returns. What now is? This episode isn't about quick fixes or silver linings. It's about staring straight into the fracture and learning to breathe there, unflinching, curious, alive. Because when life breaks you, it's handing you the raw material of transformation, the chance to meet yourself without the masks, to choose presence over panic, meaning over numbness, stillness over chaos. Each Stoic truth we'll explore is a handhold carved into the cliff face, a reminder that falling apart and unfolding can feel the same, but only one leads to growth. So, take a steady breath, feel the weight of everything you're carrying, and know that you don't have to set it down all at once. We'll move through these truths one by one, slowly, deliberately, like steps across a rope bridge stretched between who you were and who you're meant to become. 1. Pain is not the enemy. Resistance is. Pain arrives uninvited. It doesn't knock. It doesn't ask if it's a good time. It simply enters, heavy, raw, and unrelenting. In the moments that follow, we often believe it is the pain itself that's destroying us. But if we look closer, with Stoic eyes, we start to see something deeper. It's not the pain that does the most damage, it's our resistance to it. Marcus Aurelius, in his quiet reflection during one of the most turbulent times in Roman history, wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." That quote is more than philosophical poetry. It's a surgical insight into the human condition. It suggests that what torments us is not always the event, the wound, or the loss, but the mental storm we build around it. The "this shouldn't be happening" dialogue, the endless replaying of the moment, the refusal to let go. We grip our suffering like a burning coal and wonder why we're blistered. Resistance takes many forms: denial, repression, anger, overthinking, self-blame. It's the tightening of the jaw when tears want to fall. It's the numb scrolling through distraction instead of sitting with the ache. It's the voice in our head that whispers, "This shouldn't hurt," or worse, "You shouldn't feel anything at all." But the Stoics never taught detachment through denial. Their calm was not coldness, it was clarity. It was the ability to stand in the fire without adding wood. Pain, when faced without resistance, becomes presence. That doesn't mean it stops hurting, but it stops being your identity. You're no longer lost in the story of suffering. You become the one witnessing it, learning from it, softening around it. That subtle shift from resisting pain to allowing it turns chaos into teacher and suffering into signal. Imagine you're standing in a river. The current is strong. The more you fight it, the more it exhausts you. But if you stop thrashing and start flowing with it, even while it still pulls, you conserve energy. You begin to move with something larger than yourself. Pain is like that current. It doesn't need your resistance. It needs your awareness. This doesn't mean you romanticize your pain. It means you stop making it worse by demanding it disappear on your timeline. It means saying to yourself, "Yes, this hurts, and I can hold it." That's not weakness. That's inner fortitude. That's Stoic maturity. Too often we turn pain into a villain, but the deeper tragedy is that we turn ourselves into prisoners trying to avoid it. In doing so, we shut the door on growth, because pain, left unprocessed, becomes fear. And fear, left unchallenged, becomes a cage. You don't heal by pretending the wound isn't there. You heal by staying present with it, moment by moment, until it teaches you what it came to show you. Maybe it's a lesson in humility. Maybe it's a reminder of what matters. Maybe it's a path back to yourself. What if, right now, the thing that hurts you is actually trying to free you, not from pain, but from the illusion that you must always be in control? The Stoics teach us that the obstacle is not just in the way, it becomes the way. Pain, then, is not the problem, it is the process. Resistance is the refusal to grow. But if you sit with pain, quietly, without judgment, something remarkable happens. It begins to move. It breathes. It shifts. It shows you where the false edges of your identity were. It reminds you that you're still alive, and in that moment, you're no longer broken. You're simply becoming. 2. You don't need to be strong. You need to stay present. When life breaks you, the world often demands that you be strong. They tell you to hold it together, to smile, to move on quickly, to pretend. But strength, the way it's often portrayed, becomes a performance, a mask worn to hide the trembling beneath. And when you're already aching, this pressure to appear unshaken becomes another weight on your back. The Stoics, however, never taught this kind of forced strength. What they pointed to was something far more real, far more sustainable: presence. To be present is not to deny what you feel, it's to allow yourself to actually feel it, all of it. The tightness in your chest, the lump in your throat, the silence in your room that suddenly feels too loud. It's to sit with the weight, not push it away. Because avoidance doesn't protect you, it fragments you, and pretending to be strong while you're breaking inside only delays your healing. True resilience begins the moment you allow yourself to feel without shame. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." But proving yourself doesn't mean acting like you're made of stone. It means staying with the pain long enough to understand what it's asking of you. It means breathing through the storm instead of pretending the sun is shining. It means letting the tears fall without attaching a narrative of weakness to them. Presence is not passive. It is one of the most active forms of courage. Because to remain present in suffering, to keep your eyes open when all you want is to close them, that is bravery. That is what transforms pain from a destructive force into a refining one. You don't climb out of the hole by denying you're in it. You climb by looking around, understanding where you are, and deciding what to do next. Most people try to outrun their pain. They distract, suppress, numb, or rationalize. But what you run from doesn't disappear. It waits. It hides in the corners of your mind, shaping your choices, your moods, your sense of self. The Stoic doesn't run. He stands still. He listens. He lets the moment be what it is, and in that stillness, something remarkable happens. The pain begins to lose its grip. To stay present is to reclaim your power. It is to take back ownership of your emotional life. Instead of being carried by waves of reaction, you become the observer of your inner sea. This doesn't mean the waves stop, but you stop drowning in them. You learn to surf them with awareness, patience, and grace. Being present means feeling the grief without rushing to fix it. It means letting the silence stretch out, not filling it with noise or distractions. It means telling yourself, This moment is hard, and I will remain here, breathing until it passes. Because it will pass, and what stays with you won't be the pain, it will be the strength you discovered by not fleeing from it. It's easy to mistake numbness for strength, but numbness is armor, and armor keeps everything out. Not just pain, but love, joy, connection, creativity. Presence opens the gate. It lets life in again, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. So no, you don't need to be strong the way the world defines it. You don't need to suppress, perform, or fake peace. You just need to stay, to breathe, to be here. And in doing that, you'll find a strength the world cannot understand, the kind that comes from truth, from surrender, from presence. 3. Let the breakdown become the breakthrough. There are moments in life when everything you've built seems to collapse. The identity you've worn, the plans you've made, the certainty you once held, all of it dissolves in an instant, and you're left staring at the rubble, wondering who you are without it. But here's a truth the Stoics understood deeply. Destruction is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a deeper one. What breaks you can also be what builds you, not in spite of the breakdown, but because of it. A breakdown is not just a failure of your strength. It is often the failure of an old version of you that needed to die. The person who compromised too much, who ignored too many signs, who kept pretending everything was fine while their soul whispered, "This isn't it." That version cracks, not because you're weak, but because you've outgrown it. And yes, it hurts, because we mourn what we've known, even when it was never meant to last. But underneath that mourning, something sacred stirs, the possibility of becoming. In Stoic philosophy, there's no promise that life will spare you. The world will take things from you. People will leave. Health will fade. Circumstances will shift without warning. But what you always possess is your ability to respond. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And when you're shattered, the most powerful reaction isn't to force repair. It's to allow transformation. Sometimes the breakthrough doesn't look like triumph. It looks like falling apart, like crying at midnight, like feeling lost in a familiar room. But when you stay with that pain, when you stop running from it, you begin to notice the space beneath the ruins. And in that space, something begins to grow. A new way of thinking, a different way of being, a self that is not patched together, but rebuilt with intention. The breakdown breaks illusions. It strips away the roles you thought you had to play. It reveals where you've been lying to yourself. It forces you to slow down, to reevaluate, to listen, really listen, to what your life has been trying to tell you. And in that listening, you begin to hear something honest, something ancient, the voice of your real self, waiting patiently behind all the noise. Breakthrough is not always loud. It doesn't announce itself with applause. Sometimes it's just the quiet moment when you realize you don't need to go back, that the person you're becoming is far more aligned with who you truly are, that your pain has carved out new space within you, space for clarity, for peace, for strength that doesn't need to be seen to be real. The Stoic doesn't fear the breakdown, he respects it, because he knows it's not the end, it's the invitation, the doorway into a more resilient mind, a more honest existence, a deeper kind of freedom that can't be shaken by external chaos. When everything collapses, the Stoic asks, what truth is being revealed here? Because in every breakdown, there is a message, and in every message, a path forward, not back to who you were, but toward who you're meant to be. So if you feel like you're falling apart, don't rush to rebuild. Sit in the silence. Let the pieces rest. And know this: what feels like an end might just be the soil your next self is growing from. You are not broken. You are breaking open. That's where the breakthrough lives. 4. You can't heal what you refuse to face. There is a quiet war that happens inside us, not the battle with the world, but the battle with ourselves. It's the part of us that hides the wound, pretends it doesn't exist, numbs the ache, and distracts the mind so we don't have to feel. But here's the truth that Stoic wisdom never sugarcoats. You cannot heal what you won't acknowledge. Avoidance is not peace, it's delay. And in that delay, suffering quietly multiplies. The Stoics weren't interested in running from pain. They were interested in understanding it, because beneath every emotional wound, there's something real trying to get our attention, something unresolved, something denied, something that needs to be seen before it can be released. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And it's true. The pain we bury doesn't disappear. It lingers in the background, reshaping our thoughts, hijacking our reactions, controlling our decisions. It becomes the lens through which we view everything. When we refuse to face our inner discomfort, we become its prisoner. It governs our actions without our consent. It triggers reactions we don't understand. It sabotages relationships we want to protect. But the Stoic path begins with clarity. And clarity only comes when you turn toward the wound, not away from it. Imagine you've been walking around with a splinter in your hand. You cover it with a glove. You avoid touching things. You pretend it's fine, but the pain remains, subtle, persistent, and over time it gets infected. Now it's not just a splinter, it's a deeper wound. That's what avoidance does to emotional pain. It complicates it. It gives it power. Facing it, on the other hand, is the moment healing begins. This doesn't mean you dive recklessly into every hurt or trauma. It means you become honest. Honest about what's been hurting you. Honest about what you've been avoiding. Honest about the ways you've tried to outrun your own mind. Through busyness, through distractions, through pretending everything is fine. Healing doesn't require drama. It requires truth. And truth can be uncomfortable. That's why we resist it. But discomfort is the price of freedom. Because once you face the source, not just the symptoms, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop being the victim of unconscious pain and start becoming the architect of your own peace. You choose presence over pretense, honesty over illusion, growth over avoidance. The Stoic doesn't flinch from discomfort. He studies it. He listens to it. He asks, "What is this trying to teach me?" Because the Stoic understands that even suffering, when faced with awareness, becomes a guide, a teacher, a tool for refinement. Avoiding the pain keeps it alive. Facing it sets it free. So ask yourself now, what have you been refusing to feel? What emotion have you stuffed down so many times it's turned into fatigue, anxiety, or quiet rage? What part of you is still waiting to be acknowledged, not judged? The path to healing is not about fixing everything at once. It's about showing up, looking in, sitting with your truth without running. That's how the Stoic heals, not by force, but by facing what is real, with courage, with honesty, with the stillness that says, "I see you, and I'm ready now to move through you." 5. Suffering shared is suffering halved. There's a dangerous myth in the modern world that strength looks like solitude, that to be truly resilient, you must carry everything alone, that talking about your pain somehow weakens its dignity or dilutes your power. But Stoic wisdom, though often misunderstood as emotional suppression, never promoted isolation. In fact, it taught something deeper, that true strength includes knowing when to open your hands and let someone else carry a piece of the burden with you. Seneca once wrote, "No one can lead a happy life if he thinks only of himself and turns everything to his own advantage. We must live for others if we wish to live for ourselves." This isn't just about being generous. It's about being human. And being human means you are not made to heal alone. The Stoics believed in rational self-sufficiency, yes, but not in emotional isolation. They believed in cultivating deep inner strength. And that includes having the courage to say, "I'm not okay. Not yet." Think about how we treat physical pain. When you break a bone, you don't hide it. You seek help. You go to someone who can set it right. But when the fracture is inside, when it's grief, shame, regret, or heartbreak, we suddenly believe we have to handle it in silence. We pretend that needing someone makes us weak. But the opposite is true. Reaching out is an act of radical self-respect. It means you value your healing enough to not walk the path alone. There's a quiet power in sharing your pain, not in pouring it out to everyone, not in becoming dependent on validation, but in finding those few who can hold it with you, calmly, wisely, without judgment. Sometimes just being seen is enough to shift the weight, not because the problem is solved, but because it's no longer yours to carry in secret. The Stoic mind doesn't confuse vulnerability with weakness. It knows that to endure life's heaviest blows, you need more than just your own shoulders. You need support that doesn't steal your strength, but reminds you of it. A friend, a mentor, a conversation, a moment of eye contact that says, "You're not alone." And this isn't just about others, it's also about the self. You have to become someone who is safe for your own pain, who doesn't shut it down, belittle it, or ignore it. The Stoic doesn't deny the ache. He creates space for it. He breathes through it. He knows that silence can be honorable, but when silence becomes a prison, it's time to open the door. So, ask yourself honestly, who knows what you're carrying right now? Who have you allowed in, not for rescue, but for recognition? And are you willing to let yourself be seen in the places that hurt the most? Because suffering in silence isn't stoicism. It's pride. And pride can feel powerful in the moment, but it's often just fear wearing a mask. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being judged. Fear of appearing fragile. But there is nothing more human than breaking, and nothing more stoic than rising with the help of another. You don't have to say everything, you don't have to share with everyone, but find someone who can hold space, even if that someone is your own reflection in the quiet of night. Speak what hurts, honor it, and in doing so, you break the illusion that you are alone in your pain. 6. Your worst moment does not define you. There's a strange cruelty in how the mind works after failure. We often freeze ourselves in a single moment, a bad choice, a mistake, a collapse, and replay it like a broken record. It becomes a loop, not just in memory, but in identity. We don't just remember the failure, we begin to wear it, speak from it, walk through life as though that single moment is the truest version of who we are. But here's what Stoic wisdom offers with unwavering clarity, that one dark moment, no matter how painful, is not the whole story, and it never has to be the final one. Marcus Aurelius, in the quiet solitude of his journaling, reminded himself that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is not a poetic escape from responsibility. It's a radical reframing of how we live with what has broken us. Because life will break us. That is a guarantee. What matters, what defines, is how we respond, rebuild, and redirect after the fall. The Stoic does not seek to avoid pain, but to transmute it into purpose. Not to erase the past, but to repurpose it as fuel for inner transformation. Let's be honest. Some mistakes cut deeper than others. Maybe you said something in anger that changed a relationship forever. Maybe you stayed silent when courage was needed most. Maybe you walked away when you should have stayed, or stayed far too long when you knew it was time to go. And now there's a scar. But scars aren't signs of shame. They are the proof that something happened, and that you survived it. The Stoic does not hide his wounds. He learns from them. He integrates them into his character without letting them become his cage. We all have moments we wish we could undo, but regret is only useful when it becomes a tool, not a weight. Regret that teaches is Stoic. Regret that chains is self-inflicted cruelty. You cannot move forward if you keep dragging your past like a punishment. The Stoic way is not about forgetting, but about refusing to let the worst part of your story be the one you live in forever. You were not born to replay your collapse. You were born to rise from it. The question is not, did I fail? The question is, what did I build after the failure? Identity is not built in the moment we fall. It's built in the moments after, in the stillness when we decide whether to stay down or to stand up wiser. Your worst moment might be real, raw, even unforgettable, but it is not your whole truth. It is a single paragraph in a much longer chapter, and the ending is still unwritten. Think of nature. A field destroyed by fire doesn't remain ash. It regrows, sometimes more fertile than before. And in that same way, you have the power to become something that could not have existed without the flame. Pain changes us. But whether that change becomes damage or depth, that choice is ours. It's easy to let others define us by our lowest point, and sometimes the loudest judge is our own inner voice. But if that voice only reminds you of what went wrong, it's not truth. It's torment, and you don't have to live under its rule. The Stoic doesn't silence the inner critic, he retrains it. He teaches it to ask better questions, not, why did I do that? But what did I learn? Not, what did I lose? But what did I gain in clarity, in strength, in understanding? So if you're carrying a past version of yourself like a burden, ask yourself honestly, who would I be if I let go of that story? What if I stopped punishing myself and started rebuilding from what I now know? Who could I become if I no longer believed that my worst moment was the most important one? You are not your failures. You are not your collapse. You are the person who stood back up, the one who dared to look pain in the face and say, you won't own me. And that strength, the kind born not from perfection, but from perseverance. That is what defines you. Not the moment you broke, but the way you chose to rise. 7. Let go of who you were supposed to be. It's one of the quietest but most painful forms of suffering, the constant pressure to become who you thought you should be, not who you are, not who life has slowly shaped you into, but some imagined version of yourself, polished, successful, endlessly composed, a vision crafted from comparison, from childhood expectations, from the weight of culture whispering in your ear. And when life doesn't match that vision, when you fall short of that idealized identity, the shame sets in. The sense that you've failed, not just in action, but in essence. But here's the truth that the Stoics knew and lived by. Suffering is born not from what is, but from our resistance to what is. We don't suffer because we're not perfect. We suffer because we think we were supposed to be. We don't break because we change. We break because we're terrified of letting go of who we used to be, or worse, who we never even were, but kept chasing anyway. Seneca wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult." Sometimes the boldest act is not striving harder, but surrendering, letting go of the pressure to perform a role that no longer fits, realizing that the old story, the one where you had to be endlessly strong, endlessly productive, endlessly likable, no longer serves the person you are becoming. And this isn't weakness. This is the beginning of freedom. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means waking up. It means finally seeing the difference between illusion and alignment. The illusion says, be what they expect. Alignment says, be who you are. And the moment you choose alignment over illusion, you stop chasing a ghost and start living your truth. But make no mistake, this process hurts. There's grief in letting go of a version of yourself you've carried for years. There's discomfort in stepping into the unknown, especially when your entire identity was built around being someone else. But the Stoic doesn't fear discomfort. He welcomes it, because discomfort means growth is happening. And what could be more worthy of your effort than growing into your actual self? You may feel guilt for changing, for saying no, for outgrowing people, places, dreams. But outgrowing isn't betrayal, it's evolution, and you were not meant to stay the same. The acorn does not apologize for becoming the oak. The river does not seek permission to change its course. Why should you? Every time you cling to the person you thought you were supposed to be, you silence the voice of the person you are becoming. And that voice, quiet, insistent, patient, is where your peace lives. Not in perfection, not in performance, but in presence. The kind of presence that allows you to say, maybe I'm not who I planned to be, but I'm exactly who this moment calls for. So pause, breathe, ask yourself, what am I still holding on to out of fear? What roles am I playing that no longer feel true? What would happen if I finally let them go, not with resentment, but with reverence? You are not a failure because you changed. You are not lost because your path took a turn. You are not broken because your vision no longer matches your reality. You are simply in transition. And like all sacred transitions, this one demands honesty, courage, and the willingness to stand in the unknown, even when the world asks you to return to the familiar. Let go, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to trust that the real you is not behind you, but waiting just beyond this illusion. You are not here to live a rehearsed version of life. You're here to live it raw, real, and awake. 8. Stillness is a form of courage. In a world addicted to speed, stillness looks like surrender. In a culture that glorifies constant output, endless notifications, and the noise of doing, the person who chooses stillness is mistaken for someone who's falling behind. But the Stoic sees it differently. To be still in the chaos of life is not to retreat, it's to reign. Because true power, the kind that doesn't fluctuate with circumstances, isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't prove itself through motion. It holds, observes, waits, and acts with precision. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the presence of mastery. We often think of courage as action, charging forward, speaking up, standing tall. But sometimes the braver choice is to do nothing at all, to pause when anger surges, to breathe when panic rises, to sit quietly with your pain instead of escaping into distraction. Stillness requires that we stop running, not just from others, but from ourselves, and facing yourself without distraction. That is a rare kind of bravery. The Stoics practiced this intentionally. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor surrounded by war and politics, still found time each morning to retreat into his own mind, to reflect, write, and remember who he was beneath the crown. Epictetus, born a slave, taught his students to train their minds to remain still under provocation, because the moment you're reactive, you've handed over your power. And that's the danger of a restless spirit. You're always responding, always caught in the flow of things you didn't choose. Stillness, on the other hand, lets you reclaim your inner authority. It allows you to ask, do I want to act, or am I just reacting? Do I want to speak, or am I just filling space to avoid silence? We fear stillness because it confronts us with all that we've avoided, the regrets, the uncertainties, the painful memories. But avoidance never ends pain. It postpones it. And what we don't face in stillness, we repeat in chaos. You want to heal? Learn to sit with yourself, not to judge, not to fix, just to witness. This is where transformation begins, not in the noise of achievement, but in the quiet of truth. Stillness is also a source of clarity. In motion, everything blurs. In stillness, patterns emerge, intentions sharpen. You begin to see not just where you're going, but why you're going there. And once you know the why, the how becomes obvious. Decisions become simpler, words become fewer, but stronger. You stop chasing things that never mattered in the first place. And yet, stillness is uncomfortable, especially in a society that equates self-worth with productivity. But here's what most forget. You are not a machine. You are not here to produce. You are here to live, to think deeply, to feel fully, to know yourself. And that cannot happen in constant noise. Stillness is also the space where the soul breathes. It's where your mind untangles itself, where your nervous system softens, where your vision expands, where you stop performing for the world and begin to listen to your own voice again. In that still space, you remember, you are not your failures, your followers, your routines. You are the awareness behind it all. And when you reconnect with that awareness, life becomes less about controlling everything and more about aligning with what's real. So ask yourself now, when was the last time I was still, not because I was forced to be, but because I chose to be? What would it mean to make stillness part of my strength, not my shame? Could I learn to trust that in my quietest moments, I am also my wisest? You don't have to rush. You don't have to fill the silence. You only have to listen. And in that listening, something shifts. Not just your mindset, but your entire way of being. The world may keep spinning, but you can choose to stand still. 9. You are allowed to begin again. There is a quiet kind of desperation that builds when you believe you've missed your chance, a weight that grows heavier with each passing day, each habit you didn't change, each promise you broke to yourself, each version of you that you were supposed to become, but never did. It's easy to look back and feel like the door is closed, like life handed you one shot and you wasted it. But the Stoics would disagree. They would tell you, no matter how far you've wandered, the way back is always open. Because the truth is, every moment offers a return. The idea that you have to be perfect, consistent, or early in order to be worthy of transformation is a lie, a trap. It convinces you to stay stuck because the ideal has become impossible. But the Stoic doesn't wait for ideal conditions. He acts now, not when he's ready, but because he's aware. because he's awake to the simple truth that you can't change the past, but you can always change your direction. There's something deeply powerful in realizing that you can begin again, not metaphorically, but literally, that your story isn't over, that you are not bound to who you were yesterday. Yes, you made mistakes. Yes, you veered off the path. But so has every human being who has ever tried to live consciously. The Stoic path is not about walking a straight line. It's about noticing when you've drifted and choosing to return, again and again. Seneca once said, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." He didn't say it comes after success or after perfection. He said it comes from the end. That means even your lowest point, especially your lowest point, can be the place where a new chapter begins. You don't have to erase what happened. You don't have to forget. But you do have to forgive yourself enough to take the next step. Often, the thing that holds us back isn't failure. It's shame. We tell ourselves we've gone too far, wasted too much time, become too messy to deserve another chance. But shame is just fear with a mask. And fear is powerless once you look it in the eye. The Stoics knew this. They practiced beginning again daily, not because they failed, but because life demanded constant renewal. Each sunrise was a reset, each breath a chance to realign. So what does beginning again look like in real life? It's choosing to put your phone down and go for a walk when you've been numbing out. It's opening your journal after weeks of silence. It's reaching out to someone you pushed away. It's forgiving yourself for how long you waited. Beginning again doesn't require fanfare. It requires humility, presence, and the quiet courage to move without guarantee. You don't have to rebuild the whole life today. You just have to take one step that honors your values. That brings you closer to peace. That feels more like truth and less like performance. And if you fail tomorrow, you begin again the day after. That's not weakness. That's strength. That's endurance. So if life has knocked you down, if you feel lost, if the weight of what you haven't done is crushing you, stop, breathe, and remember, you're still here, which means the page is still blank, and this next sentence, it's yours to write. 10. Your scars are not shameful, they are sacred. We live in a world that glorifies the unbroken, flawless skin, perfect resumes, highlight reels of success. But what if the real beauty isn't in what stayed intact, but in what shattered and still carried on? What if the cracks in your story are not marks of failure, but proof that you lived with courage, that you faced the unbearable and kept walking? The Stoics didn't seek to erase their wounds. They didn't hide from the pain or pretend they were invincible. They wore their scars with quiet reverence, not because they were proud of the suffering itself, but because they understood what it meant, that they had endured, that they had passed through fire and emerged, not untouched, but transformed. We are taught, often without words, that to be strong is to be untouched. But strength, as the Stoics saw it, is not found in never falling. It is found in rising again with wisdom carved into your soul. A scar, in this light, is not just the memory of pain. It's the evidence of recovery. It says, I was wounded, but I did not stop there. Look closely at your life. Where are the scars you still carry? Maybe they're physical, maybe they're emotional. A heartbreak, a betrayal, a season of despair where you thought you'd never come out the other side. And yet, you did. Maybe slower than you hoped. Maybe more quietly than you imagined. But you're here. And that matters. That counts. There's a Japanese art called kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold. The cracks aren't hidden, they're highlighted. They become the most beautiful part of the piece. That's what your scars can be. Not lines of shame, but veins of gold. Not reminders of defeat, but monuments to the soul's resilience. But to see your scars this way, you have to make a shift. You have to stop trying to return to who you were before the wound. That person is gone, and that's not a tragedy. That's transformation. The Stoic doesn't mourn the old self. He honors it by becoming better because of it. He knows the wound isn't who he is, but what he does with it, that's everything. The world might try to make you feel less because you've been broken. It might whisper that you're weaker now, that your cracks are liabilities. But those who have truly suffered and chosen to rise know better. They have depth, stillness, a kind of empathy that cannot be faked. They speak less, but mean more. They walk slower, but with more weight. They don't need to prove themselves. Their presence says enough. So don't